A very warm good evening to all of you. Welcome to the 198th session of Santa's webinar series for teachers. I hope all of you are keeping safe and staying healthy. The topic for today's webinar is using reflection to enhance student learning. And the facilitator for this session is Ms. Purnima Datta. Ms. Purnima Datta, apart from being a teacher of history, she has also taught theory of knowledge, geography, environment science, and Bengali in various boards at one of India's leading schools. And apart from that, she has been HOD of humanities for multiple tenures and have had to closely work with with her colleagues in the department teaching psychology, political science, and legal studies. She also mentored them and given them feedback. She has also headed two of the seven residential houses at the school where she works as a housemaster, leading the pastoral teams there. And most relevantly, she has also conducted various history workshops for teachers both online as well as offline. She also looked after the teachers center at this school for few months. Well, she did not take this full time at that point because she enjoyed being in the classroom more than anything else. And lastly, she has also been part of the curriculum review panels for ISC and IB, where she has also been to the Harvard University to address teachers teaching Indian history. Welcome, madam. And before I hand over the session to the facilitator, I would like to inform all the teachers that they will receive participation certification for the session. So please do fill out the feedback form that will be shared with you towards the end of the session. Now the session is hand over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Rohit. Good afternoon, all, and thank you to Center and to all of you, which gives me the opportunity to discuss uh, today's topic, which is reflective practice. Right. So, before we get into the whole session, I'd like you to imagine a situation where you are coming back home at the end of the week. It could be Friday or Saturday uh, in the evening, and you've had a horrible week. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Uh, so, what do you do? Do you just blame your misfortune for it or blame others, or do you go back? Imagine if you could go back to that Monday. What are the things that you would change so that the week was not the way it turned out to be? Right? We do this intuitively, we do it instinctively as teachers, we do it all the time, even at the end of a class, if the class has gone very well. Or let us even think of a good scenario, like, the week's been fabulous, your students have all been attentive. Your head walked into the classroom while you were taking the class and complimented you on your fantastic class. At the PTM, the parents were all praising you and saying how much the children love you for being such a good teacher. Uh, Again, will you just say I was lucky this week, or should you rather go back and look at what you did right, so that all your weeks are as good as the one that just went by? Right? I think the latter is what we do, and that is what reflective practice is all about. So we start looking at a few slides that will back up our discussion. And I would expect you to be very, very active here. It's not only a one sided discussion. I'd expect you to give in your inputs, your scenarios, so that we can be as interactive as possible on this platform. So, Rohit, would you please start the slideshow for me? Thank you. So, this whole act that I was referring to, that we go back to that good week and say, oh, right, what were the things that I did right? Did I plan the lesson well? Did I include in my lesson plan things like a little activity or, you know, were the, was I very well prepared with the data, with information about the students when I was meeting the parents? And if you think those were the things you did right, you are reflecting, right? So we do it, but we don't necessarily always document it. But increasingly, especially with the requirements of the new education policy, you will find that documentation is going to be more and more important, like it is in the West at present. So, This very act is called reflective practice. Reflective practice, it's there. I've picked up one definition, and that's by an American philosopher and professor, right? But in simple words, reflective practice, it is the act of revisiting your practice in the past to improve your practice for the future. That's reflective practice, right? Uh, Doctors and nurses do it a lot. Students at medical colleges do it a lot. And increasingly now, uh, teachers and students at educational institutions are doing it on a very regular basis. Initially, I thought I will have both student and teacher reflection exercises, but in the interest of time, I have tried to have a common model which students can also use. So there is a lot of research. One might not realize it because, like I said, intuitively we do a lot of reflection. We think, okay, uh, maybe the class was inattentive because uh, you know I was also not feeling too energetic. Maybe I should drink a glass of water before that last school in the day so that I feel a little energetic. Because when you're lethargic, it is almost like it's infectious, right? We all go back to look at those practices, and there is a lot of research. But before we move on to that, we'll look at the first five responses maybe. How many of you feel you indulge in reflective practice? If you just say yes, 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 that should give us an idea. Yes, we'll count all of them, but if anybody writes anything else, we'll look at the first five comments. And that's 30 seconds, right?
So yes, ma'am, many of the participants are saying yes, I do, replying in this
Yes.
manner.
All right. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you very much. So that's very heartening to know that you reflect. Actually, it is not even surprising. As teachers, we reflect all the time. Uh, but the whole issue, like I just said, is to start documenting it now. It comes in handy for those of us who have a concrete appraisal structure at our schools. It comes in useful as evidence, uh, because when somebody raises a question at your teaching, you can always go back to your own reflections and give exact day, date, time on what went well. Also, the appraisal forms often ask you to write what went well, what went not so well, what would you want to improve. Having those reflections ready allows you to do it very convincingly and do it well, right? Like I was telling you, there's a lot of research uh, around reflection. So it seems like everybody is convinced that reflection is a good thing. So I'll share with you. It's like uh, learning fishing rather than getting a fish from somewhere, right? uh, Using a new method, maybe using a PowerPoint or using a video clip, is like getting a fish for one meal. But when you use along with that, you use reflective practices, then it's like you have learned fishing. Now you're not dependent on anyone. You can keep doing your own thing all the time. So effective teachers continually, this is what research says, apart from what John Biggs says. uh, Effective teachers continually reflect on and improve the way they do things. But reflection is not a natural process. We do it intuitively, though, but when they say it's not a natural process, it refers more to documentation of some form. Some teachers think that learning how to transact curriculum is enough. Aate jate utte bate, we will think of it and do it. Other than that, a primary aim is to complete the syllabus, transact the curriculum, and prepare them for examinations, which is not the case. It is teachers, in the teacher's own interest, to continually reflect what went well, what didn't go well, what was good about you. Also reflect on classes that you are uh, witness to, somebody else's class, for instance. If you are invited, uh, or you are asked to peer review. Also, nowadays the knowledge base is constantly expanding. If you're just trying to expand to communicate knowledge, will fall out of date. So it's like somebody said that a teaching force that uses yesterday's professional knowledge to prepare today's students for tomorrow's society is not going to be successful any longer. Right? Earlier, at least when I was in school, I know I heard from my mother that her teachers were doing pretty much the same things that uh, my teachers would be doing when I was growing up. But today, we as teachers, even I as a teacher, what I was doing in the early 2000s, I've had to improve it, uh, develop it, and catch up on my reading, most of all. So, like I said, there is a lot of research going on the effectiveness of reflection, and these researchers have developed models on how really to go about doing your reflection. So, just to give you an idea, uh, okay, uh, just a minute. Yeah. So, what are the types of reflection? How do we reflect? So this same person, Donald Shawn, the first slide where we looked at his definition of reflective practice. So it's the same person, Donald Shawn, who says it does not always have to be post facto. I opened the session talking about imagine the week that has gone by, but sometimes reflection requires to take place then and there. So again, this is Donald Shawn's model, reflection in action. So suppose you have planned everything, you have worked out your lesson, you have a structure in mind, and you have planned to do a slideshow, and the electricity goes off. So then you have to have reflection in action. Quickly, you think on your feet and uh, think of what to do instead, rather than say, "Oh my God, the electricity is not there. How will I take today's class?" Right? And the other one is called reflection on action. So that is what I was talking about initially when we started talking about how we all reflect. Right? Uh, there's a lot of benefits of reflective practice. It helps create confident teachers and students. So, how exactly does that happen? How does reflective practice help create confident teachers and students? Because it develops our ability to understand how to go about our classes, and it also helps the students. Now, like I told you at the beginning, I've tried to merge student reflection into this as well. So when you encourage your students to reflect, uh, they also have a better idea, better understanding of what they are going to do, and what do they need to do in order to be able to understand the lessons better or to write the answers better. uh, I had taken a few screenshots of reflections done by my students, uh, but because they wrote it in light blue ink, it was not showing on the slides, so I decided not to share those slides. Anyway, so you reflection helps you identify the barriers. What is getting in the way as teachers? What is getting in the way of my uh, being able to say complete the section that I thought I would complete for today's lesson, or what is getting in the way of my being able to teach that student who seemed to be inattentive through the class. So when you're reflecting, you are able to identify and therefore necessarily address them. On the student's part, conversely, the student, if he or she is encouraged to reflect, will hopefully look back and say, why was I feeling inattentive? And then when you seek feedback from your student, you get pretty constructive feedback. Sometimes we say, did you understand? And they all say yes. Uh, but you need to also see if they understand the meaning of understanding, right? So that you will only be able to see if they reflect. So when everybody is on the same page, everybody is more confident. Uh, it also makes sure you are responsible for yourself and your students. it on the part of the teachers, that's us, uh, being able to identify how our students learn. You know, we are all aware that not every student learns at the same pace. So, reflecting on why was Arpita fidgety today, probably because she already understood the first time around that I explained. So, I have to think of giving something for Arpita to do, or not pointing her out, but to say, okay, you know, after the first time around, if you have understood, then you can start answering the questions written on the board or at the end of the chapter. So here you're differentiating also for quick learners versus I will explain it again for those who might want to hear it. So because you have already reflected and you have found out that just like Arpita gets restless and inattentive, uh, because she is getting bored, because the first explanation was enough for her, uh, and once she is inattentive and restless, she's also distracting the rest of the class. Similarly, there are people who need to understand, and if they haven't understood and you move on, they will, you know, they will get disengaged and they'll be restless and they'll distract the class. You want an attentive class. So you have to, in your reflection, actually, when you take longer time off, I know we are all hard pressed for time. We'll address this in a few moments. But if you do it even once in 3 weeks and look at the students, you'll be able to have a game plan for those who learn quickly and get bored, those who get bored because they are not being able to understand. So they feel out of place and want to go away. And because they can't go away, they start feeling bored, right? So when you do this kind of reflection, you are responsible for yourself as a teacher, that you have ensured that you are able to teach them effectively and you're taking responsibility of your students as well. Also, it allows you, all of these are interlinked as you would see, allows you to adapt lessons to suit your classes. So, uh, in some schools they still have sections where section A is the highest performers, section B is average performance, and so on. So one, your classes, one also your class level. So if you, obviously we teach, say as a history teacher, I teach Mughal history to class 6 students, and I teach Mughal history to class 12 students of IBTP also. But I have to adapt in order to make it interesting for the class 12 students, because they might have already done it in class 6. But I also have to make sure that my class 6 students understand. I can't have the same plan, the same strategy for class 6 and class 12, because the depth to which they need to be taught, the skills that they need to learn are different, the requirements are different. And also, reflection helps us uh, to build better relation. So suppose I just have an example a short while away. Uh, you know, we often find ourselves talking in the common room, in the staff room. Oh my God, class 10C is so unruly. So another colleague says yes, right? So we develop that bond, we develop that relationship where we share the common problems, and then we strive to look for answers to those common problems through common strategies, which builds comradeship, friendship, better, relations between colleagues, also leading to an overall better outcome for the students, which at the end of the day is what leads to a better institution overall. More trust, uh, more friendship, better performance by the students, better behavior by the students. So reflective practice benefits has many benefits. Now, I was saying that there are many models. I don't intend for this to be a very detailed one. Can you all see it? Just for you to have an idea, I have picked up randomly about 6 of the 17 models that are there for how to go about doing effective reflection. Okay, there are 6 of them, and I have picked 2 others, the 2 simplest ones. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Yeah. So it's called the 3 point reflection model, or it's also called what, so what, and now what, right? It's very simple. So the person who really you know fine-tuned it, adapted it, is a person called William Driscoll in 1994. So what is this what, so what, now what model all about? We'll go through this. But so far, are there any questions? You could please type it in the chat box, in the message on YouTube. And any questions? 30 seconds, please, because we got to finish this session also. Rohit, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I am here. I am waiting for the participants to ask questions.
Yeah, Rohit, has anybody asked any questions?
Ma'am, one candidate is telling to please show previous slide again.
Okay, okay. This one?
Yes, ma'am.
We are not getting into the details of these slides. This is just to give you an idea of how many models of reflective practice there could be. Right? There's Kolb, there's Gibbs, and I'm going to look at the two of the simplest ones, easiest ones, which take me at the end of every unit. I spend 8 to 10 minutes, which is you finish a unit in maybe 3 weeks, right? Uh, and when I ask my students to do it, it takes them, even the most reluctant ones take like 15 minutes max. So every 2 3 weeks, spending 15 minutes might be worth it if it is beneficial.
Okay, ma'am, we have one question from Miss Jasbir Kaur. She is saying, can reflection also help to improve behavior of students?
Yes, very much so. Thank you, Jaspreet, for asking that question. Uh, like I had just discussed, uh, in the class, somebody is constantly being restless, fidgety. Now, when you reflect and you know from that student's exam marks that that student is a bright student, and you're reflecting why was the student being fidgety, and when one student fidgets and is restless, then they distract the others also, right? So you on reflection you are likely to find out this kid is getting distracted because this is a bright kid and I'm explaining a concept that is difficult for most kids. So I'm doing it maybe once, then I'm doing it again, making it even, breaking it down even further. But by then the bright student has got bored, right? And so she doesn't know what to do, and so she's fidgety. When she's fidgety, she's probably whispering something, then that person gets distracted, and then overall student behavior deteriorates. But if you reflect and you think, okay, for students like this person who's a quick learner, I'll not probably pinpoint you're a quick learner, but I'll say, okay, this is a difficult concept. So after the reflection, what is my action likely to be? Action plan. That next time when I'm going to explain a difficult concept, I'm going to say, okay, this is a difficult concept. So it might take, uh, you know, a few times of my explaining it over and over again. So those of you who understand it, as soon as you think you have understood, you start doing the answering the questions, which you might want to write on the board, or those might be at the end of the chapter, whichever you might want to answer chapter one, answer questions 1 2 and 3 at the end of the chapter, something. So they will get busy doing that, not getting bored, and the overall behavior in class will be better. Thanks so much for asking that.
Ma'am, we have one question which many participants are asking, and it is this: how can we apply these models in the classroom?
Okay. Uh, I'm just going to the next slide, which is, like I told you, I've chosen two of the easiest slides and have gone into detailed discussion on those, right? So I'm just showing you this slide 5, because, one might not really believe that there is so much research that goes on into something that we seem to be doing so intuitively. So it's like almost instinctive. अरे आज क्लास में मजा नहीं आया, and then we think क्या हुआ था, That is reflection, right? But like I told you, documentation is becoming increasingly important and integral to our profession as teachers. So there are many models. This is just for an idea. I'll tell you how we implement. So I've chosen the simplest one so that simplest ones. I've taken two of the simplest ones. So you will not have to spend more than 7 to 8 minutes doing this. So this first one is by somebody called William Driscoll, as it's written there. It says, "What? So what? Now what? What is what happened?" So uh, I'm sorry, this is just uh, challenging you with your typing speed, but the first two responses. Can you give me a scenario in your classroom in like uh, if you had a class today? Can you think of something very good that happened or something that you didn't like? If you could please type it, and again 30 minutes, and we look at only the first two, okay, in the interest of time. Rohit, would you please check?
Ma'am, one candidate is saying reflection will help us only when the child is open-minded to answer.
No, you are not reflecting openly with the child, right? So, okay, I think we need to go along with this a little longer. Meanwhile, has anybody shared a scenario?
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay, so maybe we can have this again. Thanks, Rohit. So let me share a scenario where it's the last period, and it's summers, right? It's hot, and the students are just not paying attention because after school there will be a match, right? And this is a very critical match between two houses, two groups, or maybe even an inter-school match. So everybody's excited. So that's a scenario, right? So at that point of time, we are doing reflection in thinking. That means we are taking a decision on the spot. Now, surely, one of you could write down, two of you, whichever two, I mean, all of you are welcome to write. I'll look at them later. But the first two that we receive, how would you respond to that situation? You can't just let them be disengaged and let them, hijack your class. So you have to get them to start paying attention to your subject, if not stick to your lesson plan. So can you please type in a scenario and we'll look at the first two scenarios. You will give them another 15 seconds, Rohit,
Yes, ma'am.
if somebody is thinking of, yeah,
Yes.
another 10 seconds now. Yeah. Has anybody put in anything?
Yes, when someone, Miss Shilpi Bishnoi, she's saying, I start the class with the energizer and connect to the subject.
Okay. And what is that energizer? Could you please write that down, Shilpi?
And one Miss Dipali is saying question can be correlated
Okay.
between the subject and the match, basically. A question can be correlated between the subject and the
Yeah.
match.
Yeah. In some subjects, it's very possible. Like if you're teaching mathematics, you could have a problem around, scores and goals or whatever, runs, wickets, bowling speed, whatever, uh, in this scenario. While if they're excited because the election results are coming out, it's easier to connect it to a civics lesson. So, yeah, that is one way. And you're doing what? Reflection in thinking. You are thinking on your feet, right? Uh, yeah. Has Shilpi written how she starts with an energizer and a positive connect?
Yes, ma'am. She's saying using any action rhymes or connecting to topic, making own energizers.
Okay, right, great. So I hope, all of you have got the idea just as I have. Thank you, Shilpi, and thanks, Rohit. Uh, so now we look at this what, so what, and whatever, right? Um, so in what you detail out. So just like we looked at a scenario where everybody was excited because they were more excited about a match. So you could have different responses, right? Uh, Now, the response could be students, if you don't keep quiet, I'll have to ask you to go stand outside the class. Or you could say, okay, students, you seem to be very excited and not able to sit down with the book. Why don't we do a quiz today? And everybody who gets a correct answer will get a good mark, or I don't know what is it, that every school has a different way of, uh, for teachers, classroom teachers, to reward their students in class instantly, right? Some schools give good marks, some schools give uh, little stamps, right? So, whatever it is. Uh, so, out of these two responses, suppose you had resorted to response one, your what would be this whole scenario. Students are excited, they are not listening, they're not settling down. Uh, and I ask them to settle down and remind them that if they don't, they might be asked to leave the class, right? So then, so what? Now, obviously, once you do that, when you shout and scream, especially in today's day and age, the students might calm down for a while, but very soon again they'll break into chatter, and you'll have to keep repeating this over and over again at least 5 times in the course of 40-45 minutes. So it's better to try the other approach where you think, okay, I see it's a an impossibility that I can finish today's lesson. I can finish the lesson plan I had in mind. But let me just use this opportunity to test them on the knowledge required for transacting this lesson. So simultaneously, I will have also been able to find out whether they understood the previous day's lesson, so that the next day's lesson I can make a few changes to accommodate lack of understanding or lack of clarity in some students that comes out from the quiz, right? So that is so what. Now what is, so what do I do now? So here, with helpful questions. What is the context? What is the reason for being stuck or for success? What was I or what were the others trying to achieve? What was the outcome of the situation? So, in response one, where I shouted at them, the outcome of the situation is that I had to, not much got done. But if it was response two, then although what I had set out to do didn't get done, but a lot of positive work got done by way of a formative assessment on the spot, uh, an understanding of where I might need to build on previous knowledge when I'm transacting the next lesson. What was the role in the situation? Was the role of other, what was the role of the other people in the situation? What feelings did the situation evoke in me? What was good or what was bad about the experience. So, if you write down the answers, not all of them necessarily, but if you keep these questions in mind and just write down the what, it is useful. So, I'll read you out very at a slow pace so it's not difficult. Otherwise, the number of slides would have gone out of control. So, I've put it then. So, there are two examples of reflection, one by a student and one by a colleague, a junior colleague in my department. So I'll read the one by the junior colleague because it's all of us here are teachers. So she writes, in a what, right? In a workshop this week, I didn't contribute to the discussion despite having ideas. That happens to a lot of us. It happens to me all the time. I was in a group with people I haven't worked with before. I think I was afraid of being wrong as I find the new topic difficult. So, for instance, this workshop is reflective action. It could be something very difficult, like, uh, I mean, on the same thing, but using the term metacognition, maybe, right? So this colleague says, I found the topic difficult, and so I was scared I'd be wrong. So although I had ideas, I didn't chip in. I hope that's not the case when uh, lots of you are not giving any answers there. So then I think I was afraid of being wrong. The other participants in the group seemed to know each other and just started talking and discussion. Nobody asked for my ideas, and therefore it was easy for me not to contribute. I lost focus at some point, so I didn't understand a lot of what went on, and ultimately, a lot of my time was wasted. Okay, so this is an example of a what answer. So we'll move a little faster here. So what? So, kya hua? I mean, you didn't learn very much. So what? So I'll just tell you uh, what is the so what. So the so what is, I think there are a lot of things I can do differently, right? Looking at the situation, just going there, feeling bored, feeling lost, I can do a lot of things. I can, uh, you know, read up a little if it is on a topic that I already know that the workshop is going to be on. I can, and today it's very easy. You can just Google and have an overall idea so that you're already interested. Uh, it's also so now you're looking into why didn't you write those answers when I said, can you think of a scenario? Is it because forget it, somebody else will do it, why push myself, right? But at the end of it, the end result is that your it was not as fruitful as it could have been if you were more participative. Maybe past experience that I tried to talk, but somebody was smarter and quicker and louder. And so that experience has taught me not to open my mouth. So then I have to know to be more confident. So these are all the so what's that I'm looking at, right? And these are questions, not, you don't have to answer these questions one by one by one. Broadly, if your reflection of the so what kind of answers some of these questions, then you have written a proper so what. And finally, the now what. Again, the same thing. You don't have to answer each of those questions, but overall, if your response of the now what answers some of these questions, then you're successful. So I'll just give you an example of the now what. This weekend, I will read the resources that my colleagues suggested to me, which can help me revise this current plan. I think I will have to pair up with a friend during workshops and tell them that I'm working on contributing more. I will invite them to ask me questions during departmental meetings so that I can get used to speaking and then hopefully from there be a more confident speaker. Uh, I will also read up wherever possible a little about the background of the topic. If I contribute more, I also think, now what? So now you're also thinking, if my plan is successful, then I will get more and more uh, proficient at this, and I will be a very interactive workshop participant who will therefore have a very fruitful experience of having invested time and some energy and sometimes even money in attending the workshops, right? So that I hope is pretty straightforward. Anybody for any questions? 1 minute. If there are any questions, any uh, comments, any inputs you want to make. Okay, Rohit, will you please come check if there are any?
Yes, yes, ma'am. I was checking. No questions has been asked till now, so I think we can move ahead.
All right, so I'll speed this up. So the next model, this is pretty easy and straightforward, I hope. The next model is called the four F's. The four F's are facts, feelings, findings, and future. Pretty much the same thing. You write down what what were the facts? What happened? Without any, I was getting angry. You can say I acted angrily or I shouted. Those are facts, but you can't say I was feeling helpless. Feelings, how you're feeling comes under the second F. The third F is you find out what really caused you to behave the way you did, or I was feeling very confident, I was feeling in control. So findings will, you will find out what are the things that you did that made you feel that way, and what is your takeaway. That is the fourth F, or the future, right? So for F1, these are the questions that will come in your facts section. Did anything unexpected happen? Any surprises? Did anything very predictable happen? So again, please remember, these are just prescriptive. These are just suggested. These are not prescriptive. These are not like you have to answer all of these questions. Keeping these questions in mind, if you write your reflection, or once you share it with your students, if they write their reflections, keeping in mind these questions, and the reflection ends up answering some of them or all of them, then it's a successful F1 reflection. F2, here is where you can describe the feelings in the situation, right? So, for instance, uh, feelings. You can describe the feeling. Feelings can guide you to fully understanding the situation. And so your learning is better grounded in the experience. Were you feeling helpless? Uh, were you feeling, or in a good scenario, were you feeling in control, right? Then what is it? Then the next one will be findings. What is it that made you feel in control, right? So, but don't use feeling as I felt the students were being unfair to me, or I felt that the students were badly behaved. That's judging. You are just looking at your feeling, or you could even say, I think they felt bored. That much is enough. But I felt they were being bad, or I felt they were being disobedient. Is that judgment is not for you to make in your reflection at this point. Findings. So, why did or didn't something work? How did your feelings influence what you said and did? So again, so I was feeling confident. I was feeling happy. It was a hot day, like the scenario we talked about earlier. Say, for instance, we talked about the class being inattentive because there's a match coming up, right? So uh, you were feeling tired. You were feeling hot and bothered, maybe because it's summers. It was also the end of the school day for you, right? Just like it was for the students. So maybe that is why you were a little more impatient. If it happened in the first period, you would have probably been more patient because you would not have felt so impatient, right? So, are there any missed opportunities? Again, please remember, I'm reiterating number one, that all of these questions don't need to be answered like an exam question paper. Keep these broad, these are guidelines. And keeping these guidelines in mind, you write your F3 section of reflections, and you, when you share this with your students, you can ask them to do the same. And future. So, what have I learned? It was a hot day. I was feeling hot. I was feeling bothered. I had maybe a whole lot of other classes that day. This was the last of them. So, how am I? Once I have found that out, and I know that those are the factors that made me feel impatient, that probably drinking a glass of water or keeping a bottle of water next to me uh, when I'm taking classes in summers could be useful. Uh, what has already changed? What are you looking at? When the moment you started your feedback, did it impact your behavior? Did it impact your tone with the class, which is a result of changed behavior, etc.? How to how does it look to use the findings? How do you think it will be a good idea? What plan can you make for the future? right? So these are more or less the models that we are going to find easy to use both for the students and the teachers. Uh, Now this time I hope there will be a lot more responses. How many of you would use the 3 point model, which is the what, so what, now what, and how many of you would use the F4 model? If you could please write it in the write it down on YouTube. Just write F4 or 3 point. And also, while we are at it, if you have any queries so far, any doubts, or you want me to repeat any of the slides or any of the subtopics like the two models, I'll be happy to do that.
So, ma'am, one participant, Miss Minakshi Sharma, she is asking how can this help children with special needs?
Yes. Uh, Special needs children, of course, require further assistance from the special needs educator in order to do a successful reflection, depending on the nature of the special need. You know, special need could be slow speed. A special need could be, of course, I mean, all of you, since Minakshi, you're asking this, you're likely to be a special needs teacher yourself. But what I do in such circumstances is, apart from trying to help out that student depending on his or her nature of requirement, I also refer them to the special needs educator who then trains them how to do uh, the reflection. I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer, but in this case, I can only say that much, very honestly.
Okay, one another question is should reflections be incorporated in our lesson plans as a separate field?
I don't think so. It's a very, mm, by the way, I also found out that in some schools, there is a separate reflection. In fact, it is so in mine also where I teach. There is a separate reflections diary given to each teacher, and then uh, at the end of term, all the teachers are expected to hand over that reflection diary to the uh, dean or the academic head. So if that is the case, then you write it there. But incorporating it as a part of your lesson plan might not be a good idea, because a lesson plan sometimes is more public than just going to your head, right? It's sometimes shared with colleagues. You might not be comfortable sharing it with colleagues all the time, and never share anything that you're uncomfortable sharing. So the last slide is how all can we reflect, in what ways can we reflect. You can do all of this, the 4 point model or the what, so what, now what model. You can do it in different ways. You can just actually write it down, which is what I was talking about so far, but you can also uh, speak it out loud. For some people, more than writing, if they hear themselves saying it, it's more effective. Although this reflection with an audience, unless it is documented, in a few years' time, by the time NEP is in full swing, it might not be serving the official purpose. And there is another one, uh, reflecting, like I said, so reflecting in writing, reflecting with self, where you speak out and you hear yourself and you make the whole plan just saying it out loud to yourself, or reflecting with an audience, where you can have a colleague to whom you talk. Now, be sure to make that conversation not a chat but a reflection. So keep in mind all of these pointers that are required to be answered in a reflection. So that chat will be a very different chat. Rohit, are there any responses on how many people would use F3 or, sorry, F4 or 3 point?
Yes, ma'am. So many candidate participants are saying F4, 4 Fs, and so many are saying 3 point as well. So we
Okay,
kind of had a 50-50.
Very good. So because I chose these two because these are by and large the simpler ones to use. It's just a matter of your personal choice after that. Uh, it's also time to move on to the last slide here. I'm sorry, there's some here. Reflection as a process can be applied in many different places. Right? Reflection can happen in written form, like I said, you write it down. Uh, Self reflection, so like you speak it out loud. Reflection with others or reflection with an audience. So you sit down with a colleague or all your departmental colleagues or uh, even a friend or even a senior student, right? It helps if you have that sort of bonding with your students. Then reflecting with senior students is has two benefits. One, it teaches that student how to reflect for himself or herself, and you know they see the whole situation from a very different perspective. When you're sharing it with a colleague, your colleague and you have similar perspectives on situations as teachers of the same institution, but the student sees it from the other end of the table. So you get a very different set of inputs from there. And the good thing about reflection with others is instantly after the reflection, you get inputs. Your now what and so what is also helped by, or your F3 and F4 are helped by inputs from the person or persons listening to you. And reflection using creative media. Some people love to, reflect by making mind maps or, some kind of infographic comparing this class to say Monday's first period history to Friday's fourth period history. They make infographics and see how the time might have affected. So how you can't change the timetable, you don't make the timetable. As an everyday teacher, we don't. So what you could do is tailor your lesson so you have more activities in the fourth period, or if it's a cold place and your school begins early, then have more activities in the first period when they're sleepy, so you want them out of their sleepiness. So all of that is very useful if you're using creative media. Some people also take pictures and put them together for doing the F1 or the fact or the what, right? Uh, so now,
So yes, ma'am, we
I
have one question. So,
yeah,
it is from Miss Shilpi Bagga. She is asking, if a class consists of 40 children, then how do we cater reflection of all the students as they might be different?
yeah. Uh, I really wish I could share with you. What you do is, this is not in my classroom, but I was doing a workshop with children. There were 80 of them, right? So what I did was just broke them up into groups at the end of the session and gave them big chart papers and gave them, the keywords. I didn't of my workshop. So there were words like biodiversity, global citizenship, things like that. I put them randomly across the chart sheet and I asked them to, in groups, to say how many of them understood these concepts and how many of them were going to be able to relate all of them. Because if you're looking at, so there were words like India's export import, and there was the global society, and then there was biodiversity. So, how many of you? It was all part of the same workshop. So obviously they were related. How many of you can do it? So that was a 10-minute activity, and they were quite happy to do it. So I think, of course, it is challenging. I know. I mean, even having 25 kids in a class is a great challenge to have 25 different sets of reflections. But you know, without making the kids feel bad, you can maybe one time take four reflections and say next time I will look at the other four. But from those reflections you get your input. Otherwise, by and large, reflection is for self improvement, right? For improvement of your practice. So keeping that in mind, I really know what challenges people have, and I'm lucky that I don't have to deal with 80 students at one go every time. I'm just curious, how many participants are there at the moment? Are there Is there time for everybody to interact? Rohit, if you could just tell me, I mean, just you don't need to give me the exact number, but is there enough time for us, for everybody to give their inputs?
Ma'am, we have 5 6 minutes now.
Okay, so we don't have enough time, right? So we'll do this here. Okay, so this workshop would be incomplete, of course, on reflection if we ourselves didn't engage in some reflection. So let us look at this. Uh, you're most welcome to put down your answers to these questions or any of these questions, type them in for all of us to see, and then we could conclude this workshop. So maybe 2 minutes. At 57, Rohit, if you could come back on.
Okay, ma'am.
It,
So, ma'am, we have one question from Ms. Chanchal Sharma. She's asking,
yes.
ma'am, can we have rapid fire on some important topic?
Okay. Right. So you tell me uh, what is reflection, I think is clear to all of us. I hope it is. It's just like looking back or sometimes looking at the situation and adapting according to the need or to the finding. Why is reflection important? Because it helps us improve. Uh, it makes us more confident because we know where exactly we went wrong last time, and so we know we are not going to repeat it. We are so types of reflection. There are many types of reflection. Uh, what does research on reflection say? Is there a lot of research on reflection? I think that third or fourth slide showed us. There are almost 11 different models that exist. So there are 11 different kinds of research, at least. Yeah. Just look at these, and these don't include the two that we did. So there are six here and two, eight already. So now rapid fire questions is um, yeah. Apart from these questions that you might like to answer, uh, so what is the so what now what sorry, what so what now what model also known as? Would you please type in your answers?
So, ma'am, one Ms. Putul Jha, she's saying reflection helps us to bring changes in our approach.
Yeah, that's the whole point of reflecting, right? Not only in our approach, in our practice, in our reaction. So somebody wanted a rapid fire. So is there any response on what is the what so what now what model also known as? Okay, if you don't know that, to move on, and if you wish to answer, what are the four? What are the F's stand for in the 4F model? And what four ways of reflection did we talk about at the end of the workshop, at the end of the webinar? Rohit, are there any responses? Because our time is coming to an end.
Ma'am, participants are saying 3 point view reflection model. One, Miss Monica Vyas is saying future, means you ask the four F's. So she's responding with one future.
Okay,
And
one
then
is
one, yeah, one Miss Nikita Dholakia, she is saying facts, feelings, findings, and future.
okay. Yeah, Nikita is closer to being correct, except that it's first facts, then findings, then feelings. Okay,
Yeah.
Nikita, thank you. Um,
Ma'am, we have one question from Mega Ghosh. How this 4F model is helpful for introvert students?
Yeah, reflection is very useful for intro because, like I told you, reflections normally are not. All this while, reflection was not meant for sharing if you didn't wish to. So, for an introverted student, it is all the more important. But it's not mandatory for students uh, to do the feelings bit, but curricular like IB requires reflection. So, at the end of an assignment, they have to write reflection. But that reflection does not focus on feelings. Uh, and the questions are set in a way like I shared those questions. These require you to share yourself, to be more open. But the questions that are asked in IB, for instance, don't force you to be that way. How did you behave? I mean, you can, how did you respond, and then you just talk about your academic response. So yeah, so introverted students also benefit a lot. In fact, student reflection, apart from improving their practice, was also seen as a way to allow student voice. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I hope it does, ma'am. And
Yeah.
also now we have to end this session.
Yeah.
And I would really thank you, Ms. Purnima, ma'am, for a very engaging and informative session for our community of teachers. And I'm sure that our teachers have got a lot of takeaways from this session. Thank you so much, all the participants, for engaging with us today. And to register for more such upcoming webinars, please visit my center. And see you on next Thursday then.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rohit.